Hi y'all, welcome back to the garden for the first time in a few months. I think the last time I shot a video outside was early November. We're gonna take a walk around today. It's 50 degrees in the beginning of February, which is surprising. I'm gonna show you how some things look because some things look worse than they did last year. Some things I'm surprised after this last cold spell that they've turned brown and look pretty bad. But we're gonna be checking on some of the plants in general and just showing you some things around. So let's take a look. So first things first, some of my evergreens look a little rough. The Inkberry hollies look perfectly fine. Some of the other plants, just from being under the severe cold, look rough. Even these sweet and low 𝗧𝗛𝗧𝗦, which I've told you I really like and that stay really green during winter. Well, this last spell that come through, they did not like this, but this is not the only thing showing this color. Some of my camellias are also looking a little brown. It must have been the temperature swings or something because they were perfectly fine before this last spell. But you can see they're still green underneath. I'm not sure if these leaves will fall off or if they will turn green again. This is a fairly new variety for me, so we'll see. But you can see that one back there. The leaves are still green underneath, so the plants aren't dead. They just look a little rough. Wild temperature swings of 50 degrees just in the past 2 weeks. So we've got the Camellia, which also looks really toasty. It must be from the sun and the ice and the cold weather. Not sure. But we had also some of the alliums coming up early January, and those got knocked back too. I don't know why they started coming up so early. I guess because it's close to the brick here. But even the roses, which were evergreen last year on the side of the house, are completely brown. So these will need to be defoliated. I didn't defoliate all of my roses, and I didn't do any of the climbing roses before winter set in. So these look really rough. I'm hoping I don't have a whole lot of dieback on the canes, but if I do, this is a fairly vigorous variety and it should grow back. The canes lower at the base are a little more green. They look a little black-brown, which concerns me. And then some of my other roses that I trim back pretty hard also look kind of rough. So we may have some dieback there as well. It's just one of those weird years where we're capable of getting these type of temperatures here in Southwest Ohio, but it's been fairly unusual since I've lived here. I think this is probably the coldest winter since my first winter here in 2016, 2017. So you can see how rough these canes look. They're completely brown. So they may come back. Keep an eye on them as it starts warming up here in spring. And if they need to be cut back to the ground, that is perfectly fine too, because all of the roses in my garden are on root roses to the extent the tops die, which I know these haven't. They're still green down there at the base. They will come back as the same roses that they were planted because they're not grafted. And some things, it's just so wild to see some things doing poorly, like the Inkberry hollies still look really great, and then this Carex, which is Feather Falls, which is one of the only Carex in my garden. But I love it so much. It's such a great texture and it's evergreen and it looks a little rough. There's some browning on it a little bit, but to still look that good and to have been what all of these other plants have gone through over the past few weeks, it's pretty spectacular. You can see my decision to leave a lot of my annuals in the ground, including these sun patience down here. It'll be perfectly fine by the time spring rolls around. You won't even be able to tell that these were there, or I can just throw mulch over them and plant directly around them. I'm not sure. We'll see what they look like over the next couple months, but I imagine they will break down even further. The Weeping Norway spruce looks really great. It's starting to put on some new growth, actually, it looks like. Seems a little early to be doing that, but we're not far from spring. A couple more months, I guess. So as I mentioned, I didn't get to cutting back or defoliating all of my roses. I did shoot a video on that, but I didn't necessarily make it to all of them because I had so many in the garden and just went from warm to cold as it typically does fairly quickly, which is okay. These can be cleaned up in spring, and sometimes it's even better to leave them and then clean them up early so you don't have to cut on them more than once. In this case, since the winter was so rough, I may have some cane die back, and then it'll be easier just to get it all cleaned up all at once. I noticed out here this weekend, or a couple days ago, that we're getting bulbs come up. There's already some daffodils that are coming up out of the garden, which they must have started coming up under the snow, because you can see they look like they've been stepped on, but nobody's been out here. Also, some of the perennials, since it's got a little warmer, there's still some life under there. Look at that. This is the chartreuse on the loose catmint. And I'll have to come back in spring and clean all this up. But since we still have some cold weather on the way, it'll be perfectly fine to leave those for a little while longer. Here's what the hydrangeas look like. We'll see in spring which one comes back earliest and blooms first. This experiment's going to be quite interesting this year, because it was and has been such a harsh winter. Although we did have a little bit of snowfall. Under this tree was not a whole lot of snowfall, because even though there's no leaves on this maple, it did stop some of the snow from falling directly around these hydrangeas. But it'll be interesting to see which one blooms first, and we'll be able to see those buds swelling in spring here over the next couple months. I planted several little Isley evergreens from the tiny containers I got from Stocksligers in the fall. I think I got 2 or 3 of them, and I just stuck them here kind of in the rock garden area. These will stay really tiny, and I'm impressed that they're doing so well despite such a rough winter we've had, but it's good to see anyway. Something I've been interested in watching, and is very much still alive, is this yardline viburnum. Now, this is a zone 7 plant, or it's listed as a zone 7. I'm trialing it in a zone 6. This is a south-facing wall of the house. And so the brick radiates some heat from winter and retains a little heat. So it's almost like a microclimate that I'm trialing this zone 7 plant in. In zone 7 and above, it is more likely to be evergreen all winter. You can see here that that is not the case. It looked good until a couple weeks ago when we had that really cold snap below freezing. And then the leaves, of course, are rough now. But it is still alive as of right now, and I'm hopeful that it will come back. And if it does, I don't mind that it's not evergreen here, but this is a beautiful shrub. If you're in zone 7 or above, I would recommend you grow it. I wish I had a photo of the one Proven Winners had at Cultivate last year, because it was just spectacular. It's intended to be a screening shrub, so really good to divide, provide some privacy for a sitting area in your backyard. Otherwise, the garden is much how you would expect. Things are very much asleep still. The evergreens I've been checking on quite a bit. We have wet winters here, so planting evergreens in the fall isn't as much of a risk as it may be other places where you have drier winters. So that's one thing that's nice here, and they're all looking great. I've not seen any concerns with any of the evergreens I've planted. Even the tiny camellias, you can see how good they're looking, except for these top leaves that were exposed to a little more colder weather than it liked. But I don't know that I'll get blooms off of these. I don't see a whole lot this spring or this fall, but they're so tiny. So we'll see again if we get any this coming year. All the Bailey shrubs I planted are also looking pretty good. I got mostly deciduous shrubs from them, and so there's not a whole lot to see, but they don't look particularly bad, or that they're like risk of dying. They would probably be black if they were. I've done some scratching on some things here and there, and they're still green underneath. One thing I thought was interesting is this Cobalt-n-Gold, or is this the, Cobalt-n-Gold St. John's wort, or Hypericum, is still green. It's kind of crazy. I came out here yesterday or the day before and was not expecting to see anything back here green, and it is. It looks like it's almost pushing new growth under here, which I can't imagine it's that close to doing right now, but it's interesting to see anyway. I've also got some of the azaleas from First Edition Shrubs and Trees. This is Electric Lights Double Pink. that have some buds on there. So might get some blooms out of those in spring too, which I wasn't really expecting necessarily on a shrub that small. Came out here the other day and took a photo of this Dandyman color wheel rhododendron, which was looking a little better the other day. It's got a little bit of browning on it now, but I think it's just the severe temperature swings we have had. It looks like some of the buds are swelling though, so it might be getting close to getting some blooms here. You can see them here, how big those are getting. I'm hopeful that I'll get some nice blooms off of it as well. I haven't had very good luck with rhododendrons here in Southwest Ohio. At my last property, I planted I think 1 or 2 and then several azaleas. And our higher pH soil that we often have here, they do not like it. But this one has done really well since planting last summer. It stayed really nice and green. I did add some acidic fertilizer underneath it. And then out of the wood chips that I got here, I did kind of underplant or pull in some pine needles that I found. So try and make it as beneficial for the rhododendron as I could. I've gone around yesterday or the day before and did some scratching on some of the trees as well to make sure all the trees still look like they're good. So if you want to do any testing on any of your things you've planted, trees or shrubs, you just come in, I'm going to find like this little tiny branch here. Just take your little thumbnail and scratch a little bit. If you can get under there and you can see that it's not like brown, or if it's actually kind of easy to scratch or green, that means the tree is happy. But you can kind of tell from this one, there's no browning, there's no black stems. It's a little red from being like a crab apple. And that means it's perfectly healthy despite the really cold weather we've had. I have noticed some deer on the cameras back here. So I think they may have snipped off some of the buds on my oak leaf hydrangeas back here. But we'll see if we get any blooms in the spring. We probably will, but I'm gonna have to figure out some mechanism to protect these plants. Deer spray or something this coming spring, depending on how bad the issue is. During the season, the main growing season, not seen a big issue with deer, but as soon as fall rolls around, I've had a few things come through and been very curious about some things. So we'll have to keep that in check. The 𝗖𝗟𝗏𝗧𝗦 rose wall here that I started late spring and kind of started finishing up some this fall or this past fall and trellising also looks a little rough. There's rose hips, which are kind of pretty this time of year, still on the roses, but the actual canes themselves are much more green than some of the other climbing roses, so they'll be fine as well. They'll just may need some cutback, or they may have had a little dieback. It's not necessarily uncommon for climbing roses to have those issues, especially in colder climates. One thing that I thought was interesting, out of a lot of the plants in my garden, this gold dust acuba is also a zone 7 plant, but it looks so good compared to a lot of the others. Now, over the past week, this one's seen some similar things like the others, maybe some scorching from sun or temperature changes. These leaves looked much better just a few days ago. So I think it's just the back and forth temperature swings we're getting. But I'm surprised, typically these will often die completely to the ground in zone 6. But this one, even going through that cold spell, now this is the north side of the house, it's protected a little bit, but it's not getting a whole lot of sun over here to warm it up. So there may just be some radiating heat from the house or the brick for a small microclimate, but it looks really good to be completely like below its recommended zone. There's also some ferns over here. These are autumn brilliance that I didn't realize were evergreen necessarily either. And I like seeing them. So they're still tiny because they were planted from plugs last year or the year before. In the fall, I can't remember when I planted those, but I'm excited to see them. I also noticed that several of my hellebores took a beating as well. The leaves look really rough for this time of year because normally they'd be blooming here in the next month in late winter, but we'll see if we get blooms off of them or not. Probably will, but the leaves themselves just look a little rough. I think that's going to cut it short for this video. Still taking a little slow. I'll be starting some peppers probably in the next couple weeks. That's usually the earliest seeds I start, is peppers mid-February around here, because our first or our last frost isn't typically around until Mother's Day, although the past year it was like mid-April. Last year was our last frost. So I want to be prepared and grow some really good things for the vegetable garden though this year, because I missed the vegetable garden having it last year with nice homegrown tomatoes. I did try and grow some things, it just didn't do very well, so I need better planting conditions for those. Thank y'all for joining me on this video, and remember, be a light. Take care. Bye.